It was the summer of 1967. A 45-year-old pediatrician transplanted his wife and his 3 youngest children from an affluent suburb of Boston to a small, all-black town in the heart of the Mississippi Delta. There he started up a clinic serving some of the poorest people in the country. His wife was recruited to teach English in the local high school. The youngest of his children, a 10-year-old little girl, started 5th grade as the only white person in the classroom. I was that little girl. And that started an incredible adventure for me that has stayed with me my whole life. Watching my parents devote their lives to the service of others. My father is a doctor, my mother is a teacher who eventually was teaching gang members Shakespeare in South Central Los Angeles. Crips and Bloods were learning Shakespeare in her classroom. Watching them as I was growing up, it was very natural for me to look to a career in service myself. I came to Stanford to the public management program specifically because of that, and I wanted to prepare myself to work in public transit. That was the field that I had chosen. And I was fortunate, and for the first 10 years out of school, I did exactly that here in San Francisco. Then the political environment deteriorated a little bit, and the job kind of lost some appeal. And so I did a transition. I left the public sector, and I started working in high-tech manufacturing. But I missed that sense of service that you get working in a public sector job. So I was really happy when a couple months into this new job, I got an email saying they were looking for volunteers to go into the classroom for about 4 hours a month to work with high school students. So I said, okay, you know, I'm ready. I'm missing this sense of service. So a couple weeks later, I found myself in front of 30 minority students at one of the toughest high schools in San Jose. It was a high school where kids routinely carried knives and teachers' cars were vandalized. And I had a ball. I wasn't afraid. After my time in Mississippi, something happened, and the students could tell I wasn't afraid. They could tell from my smile that I respected them, that I wasn't afraid of them, that I cared about them, and they wanted to respond to that. That made them want to do the best they could. Well, after I'd been there for about 3 or 4 weeks, my husband came home and told me a story, and I'm going to tell you the story briefly. One of his employees walked into his office and said, "I just want to thank you." What? He had no idea what it was she was going to thank him for, so he waited. She said, "I've been trying for years to convince my niece to go to college, and I can't. She just hasn't wanted to do it, hasn't wanted to consider it, doesn't feel like she could." And then about 3 weeks ago, she started talking about this tiny little lady that's been coming to her class and talking about college and saying, "You can do it. The opportunities are there. You are smart enough to do this." She said, "Then yesterday, my niece told me your name, and I figured it out. It's your wife. Mr. Ivester, your wife has made my niece want to go to college." Well, when he told me that story, I got so choked up, I could hardly talk. And I was hooked on teaching. So that made a huge difference for me. Fast forward about 10 years into the 90s, I started substitute teaching. I wanted to enjoy that for a while, and then I said, I want my own classroom. I want to put everything together. And so I ended up saying, I want to work part-time, so I looked at the college. Well, I'd been volunteering all of this time, and so I knew board members from all the local schools. What a great way to step into an environment. Within weeks, I'd been hired to work at St. Edward's University, where I now teach undergraduate students in business, many of whom are first-generation college, and many of whom are English second language. So you could say I'd come full circle, but it's not quite over, just another moment. And that is that I'm now working with my mother on a book about her years of teaching. And that book is called The Outskirts of Hope. And some of you may recognize that from President Johnson's speech when he first announced his war on poverty, going back into the mid-1960s. But the icing on the cake is the impact this has had on my own kids. In 2010, my oldest graduated from Stanford with a certificate in public management and a master's in education, and she is hoping to continue the family tradition. And that's an incredibly rewarding experience to see the impact you can have on the next generation. So I'm hoping that everyone in here will think about the next 30 years of what you can be contributing. Think about teaching. There's nothing like it.